Writing has been a constant interest for me over many years, but with many things, unless you are supremely dedicated, it's something that gets postponed until a more convenient time. It gets postponed until you have enough money in the bank. It gets postponed until the relationships around you give it permission. So although I've always been interested in writing and have written many things over the years, a lot to do with management, one or two short stories, my only real effort in serious writing of fiction has come in the last 10 years. And this one, The Snow Bridge and Other Stories, was my first effort, although it was actually published second. When I wrote it, a couple of publishers told me, oh, there's no future in short stories, which I didn't believe, but I heard what they said. So I then put it on one side and wrote a novel, which is the one that John was referring to. And then after that had become published, I then had a second go with this one and made contact with Gillian. And we seemed to get some traction there, for which I'm very grateful, both to Werner and to Proverse Publishing. Okay. So if I may, I'm going to read a short piece. This is about how I view writing, and some of you will have heard it before in a different form, but one of the essence of preparing content these days is what they call reformatting. That's a polite word for repeating. Okay, so bear with me a minute while I just go through this. So again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining me. Special thanks to Gillian, Werner, and Proverse Publishing for their continuing faith in my stories and for making this event possible. Consider, if you will, the prospect of Shakespeare, Dickens, or Dostoevsky in a room filled with the characters they have created. Prospero, Falstaff, and Bottom the Weaver, Uriah Heep, Mr. Podsnap, and Miss Havisham, Raskolnikov, Mishkin, and the brothers Karamazov. If writing fiction offers any consolation to compensate for the solitude, irregular meals, and unreliable pay, it is the existence of a magical parallel universe filled with people in whose lives the author cannot help but be immersed. Not for him the single dimension of just one existence, when he can transport himself into another world, a place of the mind conjured up from the farthest corners of his imagination. This is where he becomes his own Alice in Wonderland, pursuing the white rabbit into a warren of ideas and acquaintances, where he will not only meet the Queen of Hearts and Mock Turtle, but godlike, and with nothing to guide him but his own invention, give form to people stranger than truth. Who else, other than fantasizing children, creating images lost at the moment of conception, or stage performers whose carefully rehearsed art disappears onto the air with every anguished breath, is blessed with such power, influence, and discovery. In the warren's winding make-believe passageways and over the snow bridge, I followed my white rabbit, until it fell from sight, with me tumbling after it into strange halls, where on a high table I found the unmistakable bottle, wearing a label at its neck, bearing the famous injunction, "Drink." I took a tentative sip, and followed with the deepest draught that neither shrank me to the size of a mouse, nor inflated me until my head banged on the ceiling, as had the contents of Alice's bottle. Instead, and without the aid of keys, doors flew open around me, showing the way into this other realm, where, during the course of writing, new people and places became as real as the man or woman encountered on a street or bus. Travelling alongside the characters inhabiting my stories as they trip and stumble through uncertain relationships, independent of worldly constraint, becomes an act of almost total intimacy. I knew these people better than I knew myself. I knew what was in their minds, I knew their motivations, their flaws, excesses, and excuses, and when they stood bewildered at a crossroads, which direction they would ultimately take. Because not only had I given them birth, but conceived them in every particular, right down to the last trembling fibre of their being. Not that character creation delivers soulmates, far from it. Few, if any, of my characters in my tales have hints of salvation about them, but they are mine. And when their tangled lives are frequently the stuff of my waking thoughts, food, sleep and hygiene will take second or third place, and their story move forward with a momentum entirely of its own, leaving me, the author, as either participant or witness in their tragic, comic existences. So who were the characters of the Snowbridge and its companion stories, and where do they come from? Even writing, which appears wholly imaginative, has its origin and inspiration in an event or in something the author has seen or felt. Curiosity about human nature and observation, more than the journeyman's skill of rendering a situation into words, are the essence of character creation. A writer doesn't set out to observe, but inevitably commits incidents to memory or notepad. All authors have a notepad. Some have even made a business out of publishing their notes. But note they must, and various distillations of those sightings will find a way into our stories. Why, when that woman spoke, did she choose exactly that form of words? What was the significance of that man's choice of clothes or hairstyle? Why does she walk that way? And why does a particular facial expression imply? Didn't Yasser Arafat wear sunglasses because he wanted to hide excitement showing in the dilation of his pupils, rather than because they made him look good or he had defective eyesight? For someone who isn't a writer of fiction or a psychologist, a delayed train or a wait at a bus stop will often be a frustrating and time-wasting experience. But for the storyteller, there is hidden gold in watching and speculating on the complexity of personalities and relationships in the crowd. At the foot of an escalator or by an open doorway, raw material is delivered in a flood. Is everyone as he seems, or does he have another self, kept from sight behind a curtain? Does each person lead a contented life, revolving between the routines of home, work and family? Or is that lady leaning on the handrail, consumed by melancholy, longing and jealousy? Which of those people is a hero? Which a coward? Which tales of honour and sacrifice have they known? What lusts and perversions gnaw their hearts? What hope is there? What despair? What reason and what madness? Does that woman moving 2 steps ahead of her partner love or despise him? Is the separation significant? Have passing years wedded that other couple's lives together, or do they simply have nowhere else to go, nowhere to be free? Is that man with a smile much sought after by friends, or is he an irredeemable bore to everyone he meets? Has that perspiring couple arrived behind time, or have they come from an assignation in the car park? Did that adolescent pay for the chocolate bar he's eating, or was it shoplifted from a confectioner? Is that well-dressed woman a business executive or a hired escort? Is that dark-skinned man with a beard an actor, terrorist, hippie or fashionista? Which of them are gangsters, money launderers, thugs and drug dealers, and which plain honest folk? Replacing the now empty bottle on its high table and brushing away leaves that had blown in through the doorways, I picked up my notebook and moved away from the bottom of the escalator to think about the curious people and times I had imagined, and how I missed the company of all those characters that I had created and to whom I was bidding farewell with the completion of my book. But hush, was that a voice I heard crying out from near the tree where Alice had fallen asleep? And did it say, "Stop, he's murdering the time, off with his head"? Or was that too something I imagined? So the essence of my writing is in observation, and I gathered all that together and produced a book. And just recently I gave my boss a copy of The Snowbridge after he'd read Harbour Views, and he said to me, "Who am I going to recognise it in this time?" I told him, I hope nobody, because the characters, I don't take one character and recreate them in the book. I take a composite of ideas and attach them to certain personalities. And it's been an enormous enjoyment, an enormous privilege to win the prize with Proverse. Thank you, Judy. Almost halfway through another book. It's taking a great deal of time. I have a full-time job, and I have a wife and a son. So
is it short stories again, or is it a novel?
It's a novel. It's about Pop Lamb. You would be really.
Anybody we'd recognise?
Yeah, you might. You might be. Yes.
John, have you read any of these yet?
I haven't read. I've started one. I haven't had the time, so I'm going to take it with me on holiday this summer. But half of you, I enjoy. Philip's very good at observing characters and their traits.
Do you have any? Because Louise, you haven't read it yet either. No. Diane? You've read it, but probably.
I've read it, but I'm afraid
I'd
have to read it again.
Okay. Well, in that case, the responsibility is all mine.
Okay.
It's not a hardship to read it a second time.
No.
It might even be a pleasure. So yes, Endings was my original title, but Gillian said, "Endings? It sounds a little negative." So I explained that at the particular time of writing, I had formed the idea that all relationships between people eventually end in disappointment or even disaster. Okay. Gillian took the view that that was way too negative, and in her words, we had to give people hope. Hence the Snow Bridge. Okay. I still have a yearning for endings. I think my métier is really dark comedy. Okay, so there is always a bubble waiting to be pricked, pretensions ready to be dragged down to reality. So it's not an affirmative process. I don't boost people up and make them feel good. That's not my style. I've been a wanderer, I suppose, for many years. I'm 72, and I left home at the age of 24. And since then I've worked in many years in the Middle East, many years in California, many years in Africa, and most recently many years in Asia, both here in Hong Kong and in the Philippines. So that's a lifetime of wandering. And in between those various places where I've worked, I've travelled within the regions. Many years ago when I left Central Africa, I opted not to go home by the usual way, which is by an aeroplane to Heathrow. I got my VW Beetle out, filled it up with a tent and a can of petrol, and set off and drove all the way back through southern Africa, Angola, Mozambique, took a boat to India and then up through Afghanistan and Pakistan. So that took me 6 months. So that type of process was all an informative exploration of the world, and much of which finds its its way into my stories. There is one character in the very first story who has some connection with a lad I knew back then when I was 24, driving home from Zambia. Yeah, as expressed in the book, people are, they don't measure up to expectations. Especially for a young person, you start off anticipating the very best, full of optimism. The snow-capped summits are where we all want to strive for. But then as life goes on, you go through ups and downs, and you get a little bit disappointed that people don't shape up quite the way you hoped. Okay, and this is everybody. People you work with, people you are involved with in your family. But as I say, that was a phase I was going through at the time, and I think I've largely moved on from that. What books do I read? So the book I've just about finished reading right now, and I read on the way to London a couple of weeks ago, was The Year in the Death of Ricardo Reyes by Jose Saramago. Extraordinary book. I've never read any of his stuff before, and it really gripped me. I'm one person in a long tradition of British humour. You know, it goes back to The Goon Show, Tony Hancock, Monty Python, Round the Hall, all this sort of stuff. It tears down the icons and it pricks the bubble.
Yeah.
And it laughs at everybody, including ourselves. So I think over the years my view of the world has been seen through a prism of humour, and I can always see the ridiculousness of a situation, which again can be beneficial, it can be negative. It gets me into trouble at work when I tend to smirk behind my hand. The short stories, they're written about a number of places and a number of different cultural settings. So the ones about the Philippines, Filipino friends would identify with almost straight away. Ones about California, people who know that environment would say, huh, I recognise that. And some about London. I'm sure John, maybe even you, Yasmin, would leap on it straight away. I could actually read you a short bit from one story about London, which you might find empathy with. So this is from a story called Turning Round. And it begins, in the auditing profession, where Wallace Piflock earned a modest living, he was known as a senior. Like many of his similarly titled associates, he provided support to an accounting firm's partners while being without, other than through many unimaginative and grinding years' service, any recognisable personal qualifications. Seniors were stuck between bright young men and women who saw themselves as potential boardroom members of major corporations from their day of joining the profession as articled clerks from university, and established practitioners of some quality. Seniors were consequently disdained by the former and derided by the latter. The firm for which Wallace worked was a small and moderately prosperous partnership operating independently in the southern suburbs of London. Clients ranged from sole proprietorships, dry cleaners, to a single high street department store. Most clients were located in the immediate vicinity, but some provided opportunities for journeys to as far away as Slough and, early in February following a financial year-end, Grays in Essex. In his undemonstrative way, Wallace looked forward to half-yearly travel. Unruffled predictability and regularity suited him, but within the fleeting pressure of being left entirely alone. As a man of limited invention, the leisure pastimes he favoured during these occasional interludes were reading Agatha Christie novels and taking his dinner slowly in one of the few cafes to which he had become attached over several years of repeated visits. He was, for these brief spaces of time, and to the extent permitted by stillborn aspiration, his own man. Wallace's son and daughter were in their second and fourth year of secondary school. Sometimes he felt having children as bright as those youngsters who came to work at the practice would be nice. But he reflected rather sadly, for undistinguished parents, the production of exceptional offspring was not only unlikely, but also potentially disorientating. The present adolescence of the Piflock children was the single most trying time in Wallace's adulthood, and if intellectual challenge had been added to the already incomprehensible emotional demands of young, hormone-riddled bodies, the destruction of his peace of mind would have been absolute. Irene, the elder of the two, who had been named after Mrs. Piflock's spinster sister, came home one Saturday afternoon, shortly after her 14th birthday, with a pierced tongue containing a silver stud. The reduction of their already inarticulate teenage daughter to mumbling incoherence through temporary infection was acutely embarrassing. Not that the Piflock family had a wide social circle to observe this youthful indiscretion, but lower middle-class values were undoubtedly offended. A female child dressed in nearly universal black, from calf-length boots to the tips of waxed hair, was bad enough, but having her speak with the inflections of a troglodyte was doubly dismaying. What, bewailed Mrs. Piflock in the timeless prose of her antecedents, would the neighbours say? And from a distance, Wallace could not help but agree. The day after I published my first book, Matthew said, "I'm going to write a book." And he went to his bedroom and went, And 20 minutes later, he got it.
Fantastic.
Wait, what? When did I do that? I don't remember that.
You don't remember that? Oh, I do.
How old was I then?
That was a writing.
How old was he then? How old was he then?
How old were you? That must be 5 years ago, yeah. You'd be 5.
Right.
Yeah, I've taken threads of a personality or threads of a relationship and expanded it. So you won't look at anybody in this book and say, oh, that's Joe Blow, lives just down the road. No, it's not like that. But there are certain threads. And for people who've known me a long time and know of some of those threads, they can say, I know where that came from.
Well, for this one, for the Soul Bridge, yes I did, before it was published.
So when you read them at the end, when everything is done, or you read them intermittently?
This one intermittently, the second book at the end. And now I have kind of made an agreement with him that I will read it after it is done, because our experience with this, and I don't know whether it's probably Jillian further experience as well, but I do like to read. I do read a lot of books, and when Philip was writing this, he would ask me to read because it's a short story, and I would give him my comments, and sometimes it would be taken well, and sometimes it wouldn't be taken well. But I majored in literature, so some of my feedback would be a bit more of the technical, I would say. But isn't this the climax? And then you go through another climax again when you should be going through a denouement or something. And then at some point, I ended up telling him, "You are the artist. You're the creator. Okay, whatever I say, it's just a feedback. But this is your work." And up to now, I leave him to create what he wants to create, and when he gives it to me to read, then it's all finished. And I also acknowledge that there are more experienced people, more experts, people like Brenner and Julian, who should be giving him that feedback, not really themselves.
But when I write these things, so when I enter on the short stories, I had no prior experience of publishing a book, and I needed feedback from a number of people, and the ones I chose were a number of people in the family whose opinion I value, including Del. My sister, who knows a comma from a colon, which not everybody does, so that's quite handy. And my eldest son, who was my fiercest critic, really fierce, yeah. And if he thought it was nonsense, he had no compunction about telling me that he thought it was nonsense.
Is he writing himself, or?
I mean, he hasn't written a book. He's written a thesis, which I edited for him. So we play off each other a bit.
And how long do you spend editing after, say, a novel, or how much
a long time.
relative?
A long time.
How would you, if you had to say there's such and such amount of time, what percentage again would you spend on it?
Same again. That's right.
Same again.
Yeah, maybe even more actually. I can write something, and at the moment of getting it down on paper, I can think pretty smugly, it's good, I like that. I can come back a month later and think...
Oh, I see what you mean. You mean editing as you go along?
Yeah, I'm an encouraging editor, over and over and over and over. And I can write something and find that there's a word there which doesn't quite ring true. And sometimes it's weeks before the real word I want occurs to me, and I get it in there.
To put that in a perspective, John, when Philip was writing the book, to give him time to write, whenever there is a holiday, a longish holiday, a longish weekend in Hong Kong, I would take Matthew and fly back to Manila so he can be all alone in the house and write. And so there would be a number of times when I would do that, and I would go back and say, okay, so what have you done? And he would be saying, oh, I'm editing this story. And I said, but isn't that what you did last month when I went home? And so I would begin to think, was that all of that trouble flying out, giving him 4 days to write, worth it, when he would be doing editing and revising the same
Not a
story
linear process.
over and over again. Yes,
But if you ask some writers what were they doing all day, they'll say putting in the commas that I took out the day before. So it goes
So
around.
if you would have had no work, no full-time job,
Yeah.
when do you think you would have finished? You said 10 years.
If I dedicated myself to writing a book
Yeah.
completely, I think 18 months. If I was doing nothing else. That's not just a job, that's no family, I'm just a hermit living on a hill. So for me it does, and not all authors are the same. Some, if you're Shakespeare fan, for instance, you can write from a deep well of imagination, which is far beyond what I could achieve. So I need inspiration. I need to cite something and then create a story around it. I do have imagination, but it's not as highly developed as some of these great authors would be. There's a book written fairly recently called English Passengers, and it visualised a journey from Britain to Australia in the very early days of Australia being opened up. And it was conceived entirely from the imagination. There was no reference points or anywhere this author could have gone to get this material. And a huge work of imagination. But I couldn't do that. But I do need the contacts with people and situations.
Thank you.